Good evening and welcome to episode 1, CTEC Business with Mr. Ali. And our first episode is stakeholders. Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in and welcome to our first episode. We're going to be looking at the very important topic of stakeholder. This is a unit 1, but it does cross over to unit 2. And depending on your school, college, institution, and the specific CTEC modules that you might be picking as your coursework modules, there might be an element of stakeholder within that as well. I certainly know for some of the ones like Unit 5, Unit 4, stakeholders are an important part of the understanding of the overall unit. So this is a really, really good starting point to get yourself into a really good mindset of what a stakeholder is, why they're important, and some of the misconceptions that we have as well. So what's going to be our learning objectives today? So by the end of this lesson, you should be able to define what a stakeholder is, identify stakeholder groups, explain stakeholder objectives, analyze stakeholder influence, evaluate stakeholder conflicts, and apply that knowledge that you've now gained or revised or added to exam questions. That's really the important thing here, is to understand it, apply it, and therefore achieve it. That is the whole premise of what we're looking to do here. It's to build on existing knowledge, fortify existing knowledge, revise existing knowledge, but more importantly, how do we apply that knowledge to achieve that distinction grade that we're going for? Now, our starting point, however, is a real misconception that I see happen all the time. Okay, you can see the ticker tape at the very top of the banner here, and this is the maxim. Remember, all shareholders are stakeholders, but not all stakeholders are shareholders. Okay, once again, remember, all shareholders are stakeholders, but not all stakeholders are shareholders. One of the most common misconceptions I see when marking coursework, looking at exam questions, mocks, getting feedback from the examiners, looking at real exam papers, either low, medium, or high. Those students that have nearly passed, merits all the way to distinction stars. The thing that makes the difference on this topic is those students that really understand this maxim and those that hold that misconception. So if they see a question about shareholders, they think they're talking about stakeholders and they're the only stakeholders. If they see a question about stakeholders, then they think they're talking about shareholders, and that's not necessarily the case. And we're going to find that out today as we go through our lesson. So stakeholders does not equal shareholders. Shareholders are stakeholders. However, they are not the only stakeholders. So all stakeholders are equal to the one type of owners is the most common misconception. Every shareholder is a stakeholder, but not every stakeholder is a shareholder. It's the biggest mistake that we see. And as we go through the different categories, you'll see exactly why that misconception is made and how it can be so damaging when answering a question to do with stakeholders. So, who are the stakeholders? Businesses have many different stakeholders and they're split into internal, external. And we're going to dive into that as we look at each one of these topics. So one of the most important ones, internal, is employees. These people are there to work, to earn their wages, and to run the business. The business will not be able to do this activity if it doesn't have people working within the business. So what do they want? They want good pay. They want good working conditions. They want job security. They want to know that day in, day out, they're going to be able to come to that place of work and earn their income. And obviously some kind of career development if possible. Suppliers, integral to a business. Common misconception here is that they're internal. Because they're so important in delivering components, items, ingredients to a business, people seem to think that they are integral and part of the business, but they are not. They are external. You are a customer to your suppliers, and to you, they are your suppliers, the people that bring you the items. Both really important groups, however, external to the business. They do not make part of the business decisions, making day-to-day operations. Government, again, very important. Taxation, running the economy, laws, stipulations, regulations, all of the externalities that you learn in another unit. However, again, they're external to the business. Shareholders, These are the owners of the business, the people that own a percentage share of the business. Whether we're talking about small businesses, limited companies, or public limited companies, shareholders are technically the owners of the business. And again, really important to understand there is a debate that happens within the business community as to whether shareholders are internal or external. If you're an owner shareholder, then you are internal to the business. If you own shares in BP and you have integral to the business in terms of decision making. So you are external still to the business. However, they are technically the owners of the business. They want the business to make as much profit as possible to increase their personal wealth through share dividend and share value. The community in the local area, very important, could be really influential to the business success, both as employees, potential customers, but more importantly, in terms of picketing or challenging the business activity. It's really important to understand that a local community, if they don't want a business in the local area, they can really, really create problems for that. So it's an important group that a business needs to be aware of. Managers, more senior employees, so it still comes under the employees category, but now we have a very specific group for them because their wants and needs are slightly different. They want to achieve business goals. They want to make sure that the business is meeting its aims and objectives, and they want job satisfaction, progression, recognition, and sometimes more in terms of profit sharing or bonuses, etc. Lenders, banks, other institutions like, for example, hedge funds, venture capitalists, anybody that invests into a business, they're going to have a very specific need and a want, which is you to pay the interest, how they make their money from you as their customer, and obviously repaying back that loan and the securities. And then customers. Again, common misconception that customers are internal to the business. Absolutely integral and vital to business success. They make or break a business, but they are not internal, they're external. They do not make decisions for the business, but they affect the business by either coming and partaking and using that business's products and services, or they don't, what will lead to successful failure, but it is not internal to the business, they're outside of the business. So the key takeout here is that a stakeholder is anyone who can affect or is affected by the actions of the business. Businesses must balance the needs of all stakeholder groups to achieve long-term success. So you can see businesses at the heart of this infographic, all of the different groups, both internal, external, around it, all of them affecting and being affected by, and having different needs and wants. And the business, if it wants to move from short-term survival into the growth stage, into maturity, and to prevent decline, has to make sure that they're considering all of these stakeholder groups. So all these groups, what are their objectives? What do they want? Well, we looked at some of those. So I'm going to run through this pretty quickly, but by all means, please feel free to pause the video and look at the information. This is an extra resource for you. I might not go through every single bit of a slide, but it's there as an extra resource for you that you can then utilize in conjunction with your course textbook, any materials that your school, college, institution gives you, or any independent research and material that you might have found. They want good jobs, they want job security, they want good pay, they want good working conditions, to have a safe place of work. Customers, quality products, good service, value for money. Managers, job satisfaction, status, bonus, stability. Suppliers want prompt payment for delivering the items to you. They want to achieve long-term contracts, long-term relationships, and fair prices for what they're giving you. Lenders want you to pay those interest payments back, repay the loan back, and they want security for lending you money. Government wants to get their tax from you, whether that's VAT or the income tax, capital gains tax. They want to make sure that the country is constantly employing people. So they look at individual businesses to provide that employment opportunity. And they want to see economic growth within the business, within the local area, the local community, and then the wider national economy. So GDP, gross domestic product. Community, they're looking for jobs in the area, they want support from the local economy, and they want to protect the environment that they're in. Nobody wants a business to come in and pollute and don't hire from the local community or don't offer products and services that they want. So the local community really do have a keen interest in what businesses open up in their local area. Think about your local high street. Think about what businesses have opened recently. Do you think they're an addition to the high street? Do you think that you're going to be using them, or do you question why they're there in the first place? Shareholders, like we said, owners of the business, these guys are looking for profit. They want dividend payouts. That's the payment that they get because the company is making profit and they own shares in the company. And ultimately, they want to see that share price go up so that they increase their wealth when it comes to selling those shares compared to the price that they bought them at. So the takeaway here is that each stakeholder, as we can see, wants something different from the business. Understanding these objectives is key to understanding exam questions. Without understanding that, you will not be able to answer the exam question on that specific stakeholder group if that's what the question is looking at. So when objectives of one stakeholder group clash with another, the business must make tough decisions. Okay, so think about that. We've just identified several groups, internal and external to the business. We've looked at what their needs and wants are, and we can see they're all very different to each other. Well, what happens to the business then? The business has got its own aims and objectives, its own needs and wants. How is it going to balance that out? Well, here's some examples for you to understand how that actually looks. Well, higher wages is what is going to be wanted by, and it's going to make the employees happy. Absolutely fantastic. We're getting paid really good wages here. We're going to be loyal. We're going to work hard. However, that does come at a cost. Cost to the business in terms of direct higher costs. What does that therefore mean to the business? Well, it probably means lower profits because they're paying out more in wages. So what happens to another stakeholder group like the shareholders? They become unhappy because the business is now listing less profit. It's recording less money coming into the business because it's paying out higher wages. That means they post lower profits. Because they're posting lower profits, dividends are less. And because dividends are less and profits are lower, potentially the share price either goes down or stays the same, but certainly won't increase, and therefore adding to the share value. One scenario, one set of business decisions, but look how two different stakeholder groups are affected completely different on the ends of the spectrum. One's very happy, one's going to be really angry and upset. Example two, lower prices. Again, sounds fantastic. Customers are going to be really happy. If you go to your local business and you see that the prices are going down, every time you go into the store, you're getting great value for money, same product, same service, same quality, you're going to be happy. However, the reality is because it's lower prices, there's less revenue coming into the business. Because there's less revenue, that means, again, lower profit being recorded. Now, the owners as a stakeholder group are going to be concerned because there's less profit for them, less money for them to take away or future investment. So you can see, again, one set of business decisions, two different stakeholder groups adversely affected or positively affected. Businesses must balance the needs of different stakeholders to achieve that long-term success. These are rarely easy answers, yeah? Not easy to make those decisions and make sure that both parties are happy and you get what you want for that long-term success. So I'm introducing you here to a matrix. If you're studying business, either GCSE business, CTEC business, level 2, level 3, if you're doing A-level business or economics, you should be used to matrices. And here we've got the matrix which looks at the power versus the interest. So you can see the axes goes from low power to high power, low interest to high interest, and then we've got our 4 quadrants. Monitor, keep informed, keep satisfied, manage closely. Now, it's really important to understand that as you move across the axes from low interest to high interest, and then from low power to high power, those stakeholder groups contained within these will have different requirements from the business in terms of what the business is now going to do and what it's going to do in terms of strategies. And I've put here at the moment the kind of groups that will sit in these boxes, but they are not static. All matrices are not static. They're there to be used by the business so that it changes, it grows, and you understand as the circumstances change, whether there is a change in the classification of these stakeholders. So usually in the monitor, low power, low interest is a local community, pressure groups, media. They want to obviously understand what's going on with the business, might be interested in it. However, that interest is of low level and they've usually got low power to affect the business. In the keep informed, we've got higher interest, but we're still low power. So suppliers, small shareholders, and special interest groups. In the keep satisfied, high power, low interest, government, banks, lenders, major shareholders. You know, these guys can really affect the day-to-day running and are interested in the day-to-day running because they've got that power because of who they are. The government has got power. Banks and lenders can say yes or no, come back to close down loans. Major shareholders can vote. So therefore, we know they've got high power. but they might have low interest in some of the elements of what you're doing in the business. And then we've got the manage closely. These people have got high power and high interest. Employees, especially those that are in trade unions, customers, and government who form regulations, laws, and stipulations. So here they can really affect the business because they're highly interested, highly motivated, and they've got the power to actually affect you by the decisions they make. So we've got a real business example here. Tesco must manage employees, customers, and the government closely due to their high power and high interest. The local community may have lower power, but Tesco still keeps them informed through community initiatives. So if you go into any local Tesco and look at their board by the checkouts, you'll see they've got a local community board there, advertising local community groups, things that Tesco gets involved in, support that they give the local community. So that shows you that, yes, they recognize that they've got low power, they might have low interest in the day-to-day running, but they're going to monitor them and they're going to make sure that we show them that we acknowledge that they're there. Whereas employees, if they're part of trade union, if we don't keep them satisfied with job security, good working conditions, good wages, then what happens is the union ballots this staff. They say, yep, we want to go on strike, and you can see then that have a massive impact on the day-to-day operations of the business. So focus your time and resources on stakeholders in the high power, high interest quadrant. These are the ones where the businesses are really going to be taking note and making strategies and taking action. So the right strategy depends on the stakeholders' power, interest, and importance. So here we've got the same color schemes of collaborate, consult, communicate, and monitor. It's exactly the same things that we've just gone through, but I've given you real world examples here from Rolls-Royce, Greggs, Tesco, and EasyJet. And these are strategies that are best used for those particular interest groups. So red, collaborate for high power, consult for high power, low interest, communicate for low power, low interest, monitor for low power, low interest. The key thing here is to understand that you need to be learning contextually. You need to, as you're learning these topics, making sure that you can apply them to real businesses. Now, for those of you who are taking Unit 1 for the first time, Year 12, compared to those that are in Year 13 who have now done probably 2 resits, what you're going to understand is that contextual learning is really important. In Unit 1, Section B especially, you need to apply your answers to real businesses. So here, what I will be doing through all of the episodes is making sure that I've got real world examples that you'll be able to pull through either in your answer in a Unit 1 exam or be able to use in the Section B and pull over to Unit 2 as well as other coursework elements if necessary. But it's really important to understand that you need real world contextual knowledge. You can't just look at this theoretically. You need to be able to apply it to a real business. Let's think like an examiner. So to gain those high marks in Unit 1, identify the stakeholder, explain their objectives, analyze the conflict if there is any, recommend the most appropriate strategy, and then justify your choice or choices with clear reasons and real business examples. Okay, really, really critical here, guys. Okay, I can't underemphasize, and I really want to overemphasize the importance of this. Okay, it's really, really important that you understand that when you're answering questions, not multiple choice, not those describe or even to an extent explain questions, but those analyze, justify, those distinction level answers, 8 markers and above, you really need to be able to think like an examiner and go through a logical chain of reasoning by the time that you get to that conclusion. Okay, so this is a real key takeaway here. Think like an examiner. Identify the stakeholder group. Is it the employees? Is it the customer? Explain their objectives so you show you're flexing that knowledge muscle to show to the examiner that your knowledge, your key knowledge is being displayed very early on. Then you're analyzing conflicts if there is. So if we do this, this is going to be happy, but if we do this also, this group's going to be unhappy. Recommend the most appropriate strategy, looking at the strategies that we're going to be going through, and then justifying that choice for the recommendation that you're making and using real business examples if you can, hence why we've got Rolls-Royce, Greggs, Tesco, EasyJet. So just to go through those very quickly. Works closely with the government on innovation and sustainability to secure long-term contracts. Rolls-Royce knows that if they don't act as a really green 1, manufacturer, 2, employer, then they might not get access to those government contracts. Greggs consults with the local community. They know how important a Greggs opening is in a given area, so they always consult with the local community and involve them in making sure that they got what they want, and then the employees making sure that they're part of the whole product trial cycle as well. Tesco keeps shareholders and customers informed through annual reports, price updates, sustainability reports, as well as those boards that I was talking about. And then EasyJet monitors interest from pressure groups, especially those that are around environment, and they make resources available, or they allocate resources accordingly, either to that particular cause or elsewhere, depending on what the situation is with that particular stakeholder group as a pressure group. So, choosing the right strategy. So here we go through and understand exactly why we're doing that. So the situation is introducing price increases to protect profit margins. The customers, employees, and stakeholders are going to be affected. Customers aren't going to want to see price increases. Employees and shareholders will want to understand what that means by the business making more money. So they're going to collaborate with the stakeholders to explain the reasons, show fairness, and share the benefits. Okay, so wages being maintained, not going down, making sure that we've got loyalty schemes in place for customers to save money, even though there is price increases elsewhere potentially. So Tesco communicates very clearly to make sure that those stakeholder groups are engaged. Reducing environmental impact to meet and net zero targets. Well, here the government, community, customers, and employees are the groups affected. They're going to consult. They're going to seek views. They're going to involve the stakeholders in planning and talking to them, and show how their input is going to affect all of the stages of the decision making. Unilever, very, very big company, has lots of companies under it. Unilever is known as a umbrella company. Consults with NGOs, so non-government organizations, suppliers, and communities to develop sustainable products and make reduce plastic waste. So here we're talking about understanding the environmental impact of the business, and therefore they're going to consult with those that are going to be affected. Announcing a change in opening hours across stores. Customers are going to be affected. Obviously, employees are going to be affected, and it's going to have an impact on the local community. Here we're going to communicate, and you've got the Sainsbury's example, and then monitoring the needs, things like pressure groups, media, suppliers. Monitor is making sure that you understand, you review, and you see if they're changing. Is their interest going up? Is their power going up? Are they moving into any of the other groups? And Primark there is a really good example for you to look through. And again, once again, remember, think like an examiner, okay? Think like an examiner all the time. Right, examiner's advice. So, common mistakes students must make. Please pause this screen and go through this really carefully, especially if you've got pre-existing stakeholder and shareholder knowledge, because it's going to be really interesting to see if these are kind of the mistakes that you make. Confusing stakeholders with shareholders. So all stakeholders are shareholders, and that's the only group that exists. Listing stakeholders without explaining their objectives. Just listing the stakeholder groups is a part of that journey, but it's not where it ends. You need to make sure you understand what their needs and wants and therefore their objectives are. Forgetting to apply answers to the business in the question. A lot of the times I see people just answering generically. If you're answering generically, then you haven't answered the question, especially if it's talking about a specific business or wants you to give a specific business example. Explaining instead of analyzing. Explain, obviously, in an explain question, but especially if it's a higher mark question and if it's an analyze type question or a justify type question that needs an analysis within that, you need to carry out that analysis function. Okay, really, really important. Analyzing but failing to evaluate. So we've gone through, we've done all of the early parts, we've got the analysis out of the way, but we haven't then done the last part, which is to evaluate and say, this is what the impact is going to be, positive, negative, indifferent. And not identifying the stakeholder conflicts. Really important to point that out to the examiner. So today's command word from OCR is analyze. Explain how or why, show cause and effect, and then link the ideas together logically in your paragraph. Example, higher wages increases employee motivation, which can improve productivity, leading to higher sales revenue, which will therefore make people like shareholders really happy, because if there's increased productivity, increased sales revenue, more profit coming through the business, share prices are going to go up, dividends are going to increase. Think like the examiner, define, apply, analyze, evaluate. And here's the top tip. If your answer could fit any business, you probably haven't applied it well enough. It needs to be specific to that circumstance, specific to that business, those stakeholder groups, and that particular conflict. And again, a real world business example for you. Greg increases employees' pay by 6% to help with the cost of living. So, which stakeholders are going to benefit from this decision? Which stakeholders might be concerned from this decision? And why might there be objectives conflict? Yeah. So why would the different stakeholder group objectives be in conflict here? We know that looking at the increase in wages, staff, employees are going to be happy. However, we know that that's going to put them in direct conflict with shareholders. And if Greggs puts up the prices to recoup some of that increase in wages, that's going to put them in direct conflict with customers. Okay, so it's really important to see how all of those ideas link together. So evaluating the stakeholder strategies, again, this is extra resource for you. Please pause it, go through. You've got, again, collaborate, consult, communicate, monitor, potential benefits, potential drawbacks, real world examples, continuation with that evaluation and thinking like an examiner. Okay, so potential benefits of collaboration builds trust and strong relationships, leads to shared goals, long-term support. Time consuming, unfortunately. Businesses have to take time to build those relationships, and time is money in business. Can be costly to maintain relationships. Consult, better decisions with more information. Stakeholders feel valued, may raise expectations you can't meet, and can delay decision making. Communicate, keep stakeholders informed, reduce rumors, and builds transparency. Information can be misunderstood, however, sometimes, and one-way communication may not solve issues. If you're just talking all the time to them, giving them information rather than listening and understanding and acting on, it won't really help you, even though you are communicating. And then in the monitor, help supports issues early, allows quick response to changes because you're monitoring the situation, it's not catching you off guard. However, does not build strong relationships because you're only monitoring, you're not really getting them involved, and may be seen as intrusive if you're just constantly monitoring them. Real world example, Rolls-Royce invested in sustainable aviation fuel, which was a greener fuel and greener engines that burn less and pollute less to meet environmental goals and please regulators and communities. Well, let's evaluate this. The benefits are it's going to improve its reputation, meet future regulations, attract environmentally conscious customers and investors. So these are stakeholder groups that are going to be happy. The government's going to be placated and pressure groups are going to be placated as well. Drawbacks, high research and development costs may increase prices in the short term, but the returns take time. The judgment, a long-term strategy that is effective for sustainability and future competitiveness, despite the short-term costs. And obviously, we're going to analyze that and understand how it will affect the different stakeholder groups. That's what we're doing, thinking like an examiner. So, top tip, use phrases like on balance, overall this strategy is, in the long term, however, this could lead to. One of the number one questions that I get asked by students when it comes to giving answers is, how should I start? How should I connect? How should I end? So the top tip there is about sentence starters, how to link your sentences, how to link paragraphs, how to link those stages as you go through identifying, talking about benefits and drawbacks, analyzing, evaluating, and then making that judgment. These are the sentence starters that help, you really get the examiner's attention and make sure that you've got a cohesive answer that you're giving. Okay. So we've got mini revision there. So pause it and have a look at that mini revision so that you can see if you're keeping up with and remembering the information that we're going through. We have a knowledge check quiz here, and there is a little bit of a trick question here in number 1. Pause it, have a look at the questions. Okay, and then in the next slide, the answers will be revealed at the bottom where it says answers. Okay, so have a look at these. Remember, think like an examiner. Read the question carefully. Identify the key stakeholders. Explain how strategies affect. Obviously, these are multiple choice questions, but if you want to be able to explain it, you can still do that thinking if it was a 3 marker, 6 marker, 8 marker, and then analyze and evaluate. Okay, score tracker. If you've got 5 to 6, excellent, well done, you are exam ready. Okay, if you're getting 3 to 4, great effort, keep practicing. The knowledge is there. We need to build on it, move it from stable to mastering, Yeah, that's really what we want to do. And then that gets us our distinction stars. Keep going. If you're getting 1 or 2, try again, go back over the content. And if you did get 0, don't give up. Okay, sometimes information is a little bit difficult to assimilate. You might need to go over it a couple of times to then understand the information, but more importantly, to practice. And this is why we do the practice, guys. Okay, we do the practice, we do the mock questions so that in the exam, we don't have that exam fog, that exam stress. We don't get caught off guard by how the paper looked and how the questions feel. We want to do those mocks both within the school, the college, the institution that you're learning at, or by yourself at home, past papers, looking through exam revision material like what we're doing today, and have a look at these type of questions. Okay, the more you practice, and I'm telling you now, those top students that get distinction star are doing 5 to 6 years worth of past papers. Okay, just listen to that. 5 to 6 years worth of past papers. Now, unit 1 is an hour and a half. Unit 2 is an hour. They are not onerously long exams, and you only got 1 paper per unit. Okay, the key thing is to do those multiple years of papers, and then you see every question of every topic in every way imaginable and every permutation of the answers, and you will really be exam ready. Okay, don't just do that. You need to make sure your knowledge is at mastery. You've got distinction level knowledge flowing through, but the way you apply it, that's where the practice comes in. Okay, guys? So pausing this, answering the questions, and then go to the next slide. We'll look at the answers. So here, the trick question was number 1, competitors. Now, some people within the business community will say that a competitor is an external stakeholder. They have an interest in and they are affected by what the business does. Now, while it's true they will have an interest in what other businesses, their competition is doing, okay, what they're actually getting affected by is your business activity within the marketplace. So it's the market that is affecting them. Customers not going to them because you're better quality, better prices. Staff not wanting to work there because your conditions and your wages is higher. Investors investing in you rather than them because you're a surer bet. Can you see? They're not being directly affected by you, but by the actions that you take and therefore the consequences to the other stakeholder groups. So depending on the question, depending on whether you are learning CTEC, GCSE, A-level, economics, business, etc., okay, depending on the board that you're learning, this could be considered internal or external. The important thing to understand is why you're talking about them as a stakeholder group or why you're negating them as a stakeholder group. So it's a bit of a trick question on number 1. Number 2 is to collaborate. High power, high interest stakeholders should be fully involved and worked with. Local community, a store closure can lead to job losses and reduce spending in the local area. Number 4, increase in profit immediately. Consulting helps make better long-term decisions rather than just increasing profit quickly. 5 was collaborate. Investing in greener engines affects regulators, communities, employees, and investors. And then number 6 was employees, B. Higher wages can motivate and retain staff, improving productivity and performance. 8-mark challenge here. Here's a question. A business, Greg's, is considering closing 20 underperforming stores to reduce costs and invest in new technology. Evaluate this decision for Greg's. So how do we plan our answers? Well, we're going to identify first the key stakeholder groups. That's starting point within this topic of stakeholders. Then we're going to analyze the potential positives and the negatives for those stakeholders and the business. Never forget the business in this conversation. And then we're going to evaluate. We're going to make a judgment. Is this a good decision for Greg's? And we're going to have to justify that answer. So the top tips here is to make a clear judgment for and against, use evidence and real business context, balance short-term gains with long-term impact, consider the views of the different stakeholders. Extension here, if you really want to push yourself, consider how Greg's could manage negative impacts on the stakeholders. Again, remember our top tip of thinking like an examiner, evaluate both sides of the decision, use stakeholder objectives to support your points, make a clear justified judgment, link your answer to the business context, Greg's, and them closing 20 stores. Top answers weigh up the positives and negatives, then make a well-based judgment based on evidence. You have to justify it. Stretch your thinking. How else could Greg's achieve cost savings without closing stores? So pause this here, give yourself some time. Remember the rule, 1 minute, 1 mark. However, give yourself 10 minutes, a couple of minutes to do a plan. Think it either in your head or draw it out as a small plan, written or bullet point, and then give yourself 8 minutes to actually answer the question. Once you've given yourself that time, go over to the next slide. We'll be breaking it down. So on this slide, what we now do is we take that question, but we're going to make sure that we identify, analyze, evaluate, and justify. And then here's a model answer, looking at it line by line and what it's doing. So in this evaluation answer, we're identifying, we're analyzing, we're evaluating, we're justifying. So lines 1 and 2 do the identification, 3 and 4 do the analysis, 5 and 6 does the evaluation, and then 7 and 8 does the justify. Again, top question I get asked by CTEC students all the time. How long should my answer be? How many lines should I write? How many paragraphs should it be? It's an 8-mark question that you'll want to get a distinction level answer. And you've got 4 groups: identify, analyze, evaluate, and justify. You want at least a couple of lines for each, hence the 8-line answer. And you can see each one is multiple lines anyway. Okay, so that gives you an idea. Any less than that, you might be missing out elements. Any more than that, you could be just waffling and going on too much, losing the examiner, losing your thread, and not actually gaining yourself any marks. Okay, so check your answer against this particular model answer. And here we've got a pass is going to be 3 to 4 marks, merit 5 to 6, distinction 7 and 8. At distinction, there is a thorough evaluation of both sides. Okay, that's the thing. There's that thorough evaluation. There's an excellent use of the stakeholder objectives and context, Greg's here, and then balanced, well-justified judgment with real business application. Okay, remember, think like the examiner. The examiner's going to be looking, have you evaluated? Have you weighed up both sides? Have you used stakeholder objectives? Have you applied it to Greg's, the business that is named in the question? You'll be surprised how many students leave out the business or talk about another business. Is your judgment clear and justified? Could you improve with more real evidence if necessary? Okay, so again, pause and have a look at that one to see how you fare against the model answer, and therefore give yourself that grade of pass, merit, or distinction. On this one, I've gone through and I've just given you actual pass answers, merit answers, and distinction answers. So I'm not going to run through this. This is, again, a resource slide for you, just taking that same question, that same 4-step process, but looking at how short and how limited in its response a pass answer is, only getting you that 3 to 4 marks. The merit, taking that by expanding it, giving you 5 to 6 with a clear evaluation and now some justifications. But then the distinction, you can see a lot of detail there. Comprehensive evaluation with balanced and justified judgment. The key to the higher marks is balance both sides, use the stakeholder objectives, apply to Greg's, make a clear justified judgment, use your connectives. However, therefore, overall, because language is important in making it easy for the examiner to follow. So again, pause, have a look at those model answers in terms of what they would have got you and see how your answer fares. Are you in the pass category, merit, distinction, and do you understand how to move across all 3 of those? So a recap and our key takeaways. So we've now understood what a stakeholder is: individuals or groups affected by or affecting the business decisions. Stakeholder objectives: different stakeholders have different needs and goals. Stakeholder strategies: monitor, keep informed, consult, collaborate, communicate. Strategies that we use, evaluating those strategies, weighing up the positives and negatives for the business and the stakeholders. Application and exam skills, using real business examples, contextual learning, command words, evaluation, and to achieve those top marks. Okay, that's the way that we're going to do it. The best businesses listen to their stakeholders, understand their needs, and make decisions that create long-term value. So the recap summary: stakeholders, objective, strategies, evaluation, exam skills, what we learned, why it matters. So any group or individual that's affected by or affects the business helps business make informed decisions and avoid conflicts by being able to understand them. Objectives: stakeholders have different goals which may align or conflict with each other and or the business. Understanding objectives helps prioritize and balance needs. And then the business use different strategies to manage stakeholder relationships, builds trust, support long-term success. When we evaluate the strategies by considering both the positive and negatives, we're leading to a really well justified decision and those higher exam marks. And those exam skills, using command words, apply to the business and evaluate effectively, key to achieving that merit and distinction in the exams. And there's the real business in action, the 20 closing of underperforming stores, the potential positives, lower cost and higher profits, investment in technology, better customer experience, stronger long-term growth because we're closing those that are struggling, potential impacts, job losses for employees, negative impact on local communities that lose that business opportunity, lose those products, lose those services, lose the employability, possible damage to reputation because they have closed, and then loss of customer loyalty because they've moved out of a given area. So the exam takeaways, we've now learned how to define key terms, explain strategies, analyze the impact on different stakeholder groups, evaluate by weighing up both sides, positive and negative, both stakeholder groups or more, and then justifying that final judgment with evidence. Reflection questions. Which stakeholders will be most affected by a decision? Do the benefits outweigh the drawbacks for Greggs? How could Greggs reduce the negative impacts? What would you do if you were the CEO of Greggs? So what do we do now that we're getting to the end of that topic? So review your notes and your key terms. Have a glossary. Make sure that you're really writing down in a way that is accessible to you. Some people prefer flashcards. Some people make really detailed notes, Cornell notes. Some people do mind maps. Some people do infographics. Whatever works for you. Don't do something that somebody else does because it might not be right for you. You need to find out what works for you as your learning tool. Okay, but the important thing here though is to review your notes and your key terms. Practice those exam questions. Remember what we said at the end of year 12, you want to be in a position for unit 1 and unit 2 where you've done at least 5 to 6 years worth of past papers, and we'll look at exam techniques in a future episode. Apply to other businesses in real life. Take all of this information, all of the case examples that we've looked at, apply it to a business that you know, a local business or a big chain business or an international business. Think about how Apple or Tesla or McDonald's apply these learnings that you've seen today. Okay, so it's really key to be able to do that contextual learning. So that brings us to the end of episode 1, stakeholders. Thank you so much for taking the time to find this video and to watch it, especially if you've watched it to the end. Please like, share, and subscribe these videos. Even if you're not studying business, you might have an interest in business, want to know more about business. If you are studying business, it doesn't matter whether it's GCSE, A-level, CTEC, BTEC, level 2, level 3. It doesn't matter what the title of the course is. If there is a business element within it, accounting, finance, law, this information is still going to be applicable for you. My main focus is the CTEC course, obviously. However, this knowledge is universal as is business knowledge. So if you could like, if you could share, if you could subscribe, it would be great. See you in the next episode. Okay, we're going to be looking at business objectives in our next episode. And remember, success in exams comes from preparation today, not pressure tomorrow. Keep learning, keep growing, keep achieving. Remember our motto: understand it, apply it, achieve it. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in to Business with Mr. Ali. I hope you found it informative. I would love to hear from you in the comments section. Give this a thumbs up and good luck with your learning.